Before we begin, I would like to explain a little bit about the nature of this panel. We've been discussing this yesterday at length, and we noticed that we would like to, although it's maybe complicated to have a conversation with so many distinguished people at the same time, that it's quite interesting to try to open the bridges to all parts of the world. So thank you all for coming and joining us for this panel. And I would like to invite each and every one of you to introduce himself and explain also his role in actually leading EdTech in his region. Mike, will you be able?
Sure. And well done, Yaki. I know it's not easy putting together an event, so good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Michalec. I actually wear two hats. EdTech Asia essentially is a community platform that I started about 5 years ago with the intention of having a more collaborative and cohesive regional ecosystem. There was a lot going on in terms of education entrepreneurship within individual countries, but not so much in terms of cross-border collaboration. So we have a platform that essentially serves as a hub for that. We've done over 40 events in the last 3 years. We have an annual summit as well, very similar to this. Yaki was a speaker. But it's basically to help build the capacity of the local ecosystems and to spur education innovation.
Hi guys, it's Hakan Satiroglu. As Yaki mentioned, I'm based in Boston, a group called LearnLaunch. I'm an education technology entrepreneur for the past almost 17 years. Started some of the, created some of the earliest products the market has seen, such as ebooks, learning management systems. And when I sold that company, I said, look, we need an ecosystem that could support entrepreneurs more effectively. I have 4 other co-founders, but my main motivation was, can we create a system that will give access to funders, to sales pipelines for the entrepreneurs to reach those markets better. At the same time, we wanted to, as Mike is doing, connect the ecosystem more. So we have our own co-working space that's about 10,000 square foot. As many as 30, 40 companies. Boston is home to over 450 EdTech companies now. I think close to 24,000 jobs are being supported as a result. We also do events, and then I love media, so I've been pushing media in EdTech under the brand EdTech Times. Happy to be here.
First, thanks, Dr. Yaki. It's a privilege to speak here. My name is Wang. I'm from Shanghai. I'm an attorney since the year of 2000, focusing on M&A, PE transactions, as well as international trade and anti-bribery litigation. What led to me to be a founding member of Impact Hub is a very interesting kind of cross-section of law and sustainability. Impact Hub itself is an incubator for social enterprise who will be able to deliver not only commercially viable return, but also social impact, specifically to environmental protection, human health improvement, and eco-friendly application of a variety of new materials and new application, as well as the education sector. It has already had 200 hubs around 200 municipalities around the planet in Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, but it hasn't had a hub until last year. That there are 3 founding members coming from sustainability and green financing, as well as from the Chinese academia. They become the core member of this Impact Hub to launch it into Shanghai. And I am I think there was a typo there. It should be founding member. We have 3 co-founders along with 24 founding members, and that reflects the unique corporate governance of Impact Hub to make it as a incubator between a VC or private equity or as a incubator in-house like a Microsoft incubator. It's something in between, and then all the members have the potential to duplicate the success that they will be able to enjoy, and then they will be able to duplicate further into other municipalities, and that will be the criteria we select them to become on board. And once they become on board, they would become able to get exposure to, most importantly, to the education necessary on the job to learn how to lead, and also to learn how to do the measurement in terms of their risk return assessment of their business model, and obtain the necessary acquisition capital to scale up their business model that could deliver commercial return, and as well as the social impact we expect and envisage these member companies will deliver. And initially, we have had 3 projects at this moment. One is the early education project. Another is called ecotourism in China, very new, helping the Chinese biggest listed company, Alibaba, to do the eco tour of its employees in a way that they build up the team building within Alibaba. At the same time, they help to change the environment and bring a better morality within their employees. So that's a bit long introduction of Impact Hub, and thank you for this time.
Firstly, I would like to thank Yaki for organizing this platform where a lot of international investors have come together, and I think this is also one of the themes that we are to discuss. We need more platforms like this, and I represent a very small fund called Invictus Capital Partners. We began our operations only last year. Previously, we've invested in larger mergers and acquisitions, but we felt that we should be working with really game-changing ideas, and for that, my company, my parent group, started Invictus Capital Partners. My parent group is EduComp, which is one of India's largest EdTech companies. We make sales and distribution to around 12,000 different public schools in India, among other activities. And yeah, that's pretty much. Thank you.
Itai, if you may, when you introduce yourself, also can you introduce not only your role, but also Africa as an opportunity for Israeli education systems?
Okay, thank you. Shalom. My name is Itai. I'm one of 40-something trade attaches that the Israeli taxpayers pay to be around the world and help businesses do business. We do matchmaking, we find partners, we bring investments. We have delegations coming to Israel, we have delegations going to our countries, because education is very close to my heart and very important for Africa. So I will mention in a moment. Then next month, we will be hosting a delegation of Israeli EdTech companies in South Africa for an event called African Education Week, because we feel it's very important. And it is important, Yaki, as you mentioned, Africa is a unique continent. It's coming from behind, but it's the youngest continent today. More than half the people in Africa are under the age of 30. And education is going to be what determines if Africa will make it. True, they've got natural resources, but to move up the food chain, to make something of that, they need education. If you look at higher education, the professors there have 50% more students than other professors in the rest of the world, in average, and less than 10% have access to academic education, as opposed to high 20s in the rest of the world. If you look at the basic education, there's a shortage of 1 million teachers in Africa. So if we want all the children in Africa to be schooled, and they are not schooled today, many of them, then we need another 1 million teachers, and we are not going to get those 1 million teachers and to train those 1 million teachers without the use of technology as a multiplying power. So therefore, the importance of EdTech in Africa, and you've got to distinguish between very nice tools that we've seen here for advanced private schools or government schools, and between places where it's a question of going to school and even delivering the most basic kind of education, which is meaningful.
Well, you mentioned those challenges, which reminds me, like I've been a few months ago in India, actually also visiting Educom, and when we in Israel, sometimes we talk about access problem, we speak about the problem of actually not having Wi-Fi or bandwidth access. And I learned that in India, for example, access problem is actually kids are not sending their, parents are not sending their kids to school in the first place. So the kids are not actually even accessing the school. So if possible, I'd like to go from Rajat to Mike and ask for each one of you for a second, not to think about only your role of your company, but also like a representative of the nation or the region that you represent, and maybe give us some feeling of what does it mean, and what is the, I know, always time is a challenge, and we can only dwell 2 days on India alone, but can you maybe give us 1 or 2 or 3 interesting things that make your region different? And so
Sure.
Okay.
So with our organization, we've had events in 9 different countries. We're mostly focused on ASEAN, so there's 10 countries in the ASEAN Economic Community.
We are from Israel. We don't know what it means. Can you name us the countries, please?
Are you serious, Yaki?
Yeah, you
Okay.
said 9. Okay,
Okay, here
it
we
shouldn't be
go.
that long, but
So, yeah, Brunei, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand.
what's the total population of
Myanmar.
all this region?
Over 600 million, yeah.
Wow.
600, little more than 600 million collectively. Yeah, GDP growth 5% consistently. GDP per capita, I think Malaysia is emerging into about $20,000 a year. So it's an extreme growth region that often gets overlooked because so many people are focusing on China and India. But in terms of the core issues, I just like your comments, what you were alluding to with Africa. In Southeast Asia specifically, because my other hat, which I didn't get to finish, my other hat is international development, so I'm quite cognizant of what's going on in education and international development. There's 3.5 million children out of school just in Southeast Asia, 2 million of those in Indonesia alone. Thailand has about 400,000. I think it's Philippines and another 400,000. Teacher-student ratio, Cambodia, 45-1. Something like 47% of primary students that students that enter primary education don't finish. That's in Cambodia. So it's great to have all these education and innovative education solutions, but it's also something that we need to focus on is have some narrative towards what are the core issues. And I know the Middle East and this part of the world has issues. I've worked in Jordan with Syrian refugees, setting up systems there as well. But if you're looking to enter some of these markets outside of Israel, I very much suggest focusing on somewhat of these core problems or core issues, because there's a lot of opportunity for both to do good and also to make some money.
And again, coming to an event like this is great, because now you're asking other people, like I had a conversation with, how the teachers are supported in Israel, and I see a lot of similarities in U.S. We do spend a lot of money on education, and even in places like Boston, or Cambridge, where MIT and Harvard are, and tremendous $25,000, $30,000 a year may be spent on our students, and the overall sense is still there's a lot of work to be done, and sometimes it's good to see what other regions are struggling with, or they're trying to achieve more, so that could give our 400, 500 startups in a city, or a few thousand probably in the country, the ability to see it as a worldwide issue. Very likely, our teachers and teachers globally are kind of need, very similar support elements. So that's, for me, was great to see coming here and talking to different people from different parts of the world.
But I would like to make a distinction, Hakan, with your permission. I think that it's probably embedded in the DNA of every Israeli startup to go to the US first. And I think that one of the questions that we at this summit and last year are trying to raise all the time is this really where all Israeli startups should go? Because some people might say that the US market is saturated with so many American startups. So if you had an advice for an Israeli startup, if he needs to go maybe to Africa or to Boston, where does he has a better chance? Itai knows the answers.
I know the difficulties and challenges of U.S. education, how to break into that. So, where I could be most help is obviously there. I'm just starting to go around the world to understand, it is not easy in the U.S. to break into the system. Not only, even if there was half the number of startups, you still need to know the system well. You still need to build into the system. You still need to understand the components, which I'm sure is the same anywhere in the world. Yes, if they know me, they need to come to US, there where I could be the most help. But, I think they need to start looking at everything globally when they're creating the product developments. And because, we're talking about, hundreds of millions of, students in Latin America, Asia, Africa. So it's a big market. So I don't think they can say, where should we go first? And it's part of it is, yes, there's a lot more capital floating in the US. There's a lot, easier access because it's a lot more established now that I've been, again, involved 10, 15 years. So I'm sure it's going to be a challenging question.
And what about the Chinese market? Is it a good time for Israeli companies maybe to try to approach this market? What is your feeling about the possibility of actually doing business between Israel and China on education technologies?
Well, I would say that with very much welcoming environment at this moment, but at the same time, you have to be prudent in terms of your understanding, how solid you understand the regulatory barriers there, and how solid you have conducted your due diligence in terms of your potential joint venture partners and your potential customer base as well as your supply chain there. But overall, just within a few weeks before this summit, the Chinese government made a certain very big policy move to give tax break to venture capital who invested in early stage of companies. If you qualify as a venture capital investor within 24 months of a startup, then the tax break of 70% of your investment would be pre-tax deductible, and your exit could be just 1 year lock-in period after the company get listed instead of 3 years regularly in most of the capital markets. And that's a very strong signal the Chinese government sent to the international community that we are not only welcoming Fortune 500 companies coming to China, but also startups here as well.
Oh, okay. So, and you say that's a recent change in the regulation?
Yes, of course, and the change just started. Of course, there will be implementation regulatory measures at the provincial level and at the county level to be taking place, and that you will feel comfortable to invest. But I think within the next 2 to 3 years, that would be very good timing for Israeli startup to think about them as a foreign investor, not just as startup, because if you have a proven business model applicable in Boston, I think the Chinese market will welcome that kind of proven education technology, and beyond that, Israel has made a very positive social impact in the region, in environmental treatment, in harmony that's building, and those social impact is also what the Chinese government is looking for very positively beyond the acquisitive mind for technology itself.
Thank you. And Rajat, how about India? Any chance for us to do business over there? What is required to do business? What are the kind of opportunities that we have in your enormous country?
So, while my intention is to, bring more clarity, but I'm afraid I may, even confuse even more. So, India is a very, very diverse country, and it's actually a continent masquerading as a country. So we have around 1.3 billion population. We have a huge variety of languages. We have so many regional identities. So very, very diverse country. And similarly, the education system itself is very diverse. So while we have school systems and universities which are top of the pecking orders, there is another reality which is that India also has a very sizable public school system which is not very efficient. While world over countries are dealing with issues of how to elevate quality, India is battling with both the issues of how to battle quality of education as well as access to education. So the challenges in India are very unique, and the consumer behavior in India is very unique. At what time should a company enter? I'll give you a very different analogy. So for instance, when the smartphone revolution came in, Google Android phones were selling like hotcakes. And while Apple was also selling, but it was limited to only a section of population, maybe 10 or 20% of the population. And Apple was not really paying focus to India, whereas Google had full attention to India. Only now Apple has started to reconsider its India strategy. So drawing a parallel from there, what I would say is that India, if your product is a volumes-based product, and you can obviously go down on pricing because it's a very price-sensitive market, then the volumes are there. And if your product is more value-based product, there is a market which exists, and obviously because it's such a sizable country, even if you capture like 10% of the country. So for example, in student population, if you're catering to 10% of the students, you are catering to 32 million students.
Julian, I would like to ask you a little bit about Africa and the opportunities over there. And maybe if you can tell us a little bit about your outreach over there and your the way that you are connected to this continent.
Thank you very much. Firstly, we are the largest, EduCore is the largest private provider of higher education in sub-Saharan Africa. And because of our position in South Africa, we are now embarking on a Pan-African strategy. One of the amazing things about Africa is that there isn't one Pan-African education player. And our aim is to fulfill that role. Now, we're talking about 54 countries, and you can't approach it as a cookie-cutter approach. Each country has its own uniqueness. And whilst they might be sitting next to each other, they don't necessarily behave the same. So our position is that how does one touch 1 billion people across the continent of Africa? And whilst our business in sub-Saharan Africa is largely a traditional business in terms of we have 30 campuses across South Africa, and it's a bricks and mortar business. Now, for obvious reasons, you can't do a bricks and mortar business across the continent of Africa because you simply won't reach the people that you want to reach. So how do you do that? And the approach that we are taking is to have more of a blended online position. Listen, I've been in education for about 20 years. I mean, I've sat with some of my peers across the continent and across the world, and I can tell you this much: there are three things in higher education, which is the space that we play in, and that's access, success, and quality. And there are measurement tools as to how you approach these three things. And I think if you can achieve those three things, you can achieve a lot of things in Africa. And our position is, how do we get there? I was speaking at a panel yesterday, and I said that don't expect a lot of the fun things to come out of Silicon Valley. I mean, I've just spent the better part of maybe 2 days in Israel, and I can tell you, it can come out of here. In fact, personally, I have no idea how many unicorns were actually birthed in Israel, but I can tell you from an EdTech space, it can happen right here, and that's why, in fact, I'm actually here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we actually are running out of time, so I'd like to just maybe, Itai, with your vast experience, we have here distinguished people from all around the world. And sometimes we as Israelis are doing business slightly different than other players. So if there is maybe one or two things that you can say as an advice, so how we as Israelis, the two of us, can actually help facilitate business with the international community?
So to the Israelis, I usually say patience. But when I speak, and I do a lot of business connections around the world, and when I speak to the foreigner part of the equation, I will say, bear with us. We are not rude. We are impatient. Okay, we want to get things done. And if we're calling you the next day, have you read the presentation? Why haven't you replied to my email? It's not because we are rude, but we are direct. We are very target-driven. And you should see that as an opportunity to work with us, because Israeli companies and everybody today is agile. Agile is the word now when you talk about IT. But Israelis are agile because that's the way we think. So I usually say, if you want something to happen, if you want to get something modified, if you want to change whatever is happening, ask an Israeli. If you want to run a big corporations with standard operation procedures, go find a German, find an American. But if you want something done quickly, to the point, efficiently, talk to the Israelis. And it's really an opportunity to work together, because I think everyone brings a different quality to the table. And only thing is, you have to put up with us being a bit impatient.
And Rajat, I see that you want to say something about it.
So I find, Israeli companies and Israel as a nation as a very, very big complementary to the Indian nation. The reason why I say this is, firstly, we have, in Israel you have very, very bright minds. But being a small country, it is a tendency of the Israeli entrepreneur to think about, going global. And that is why I think Israeli companies would be the best placed, best set of entrepreneurs who can do business in India. Because elsewhere what I have seen is that many people are trying to solve local problems which are pertaining to their economy. I'm not saying that that's a bad idea, that's, you're serving to a very specific need. But that need is not global. But what I find in Israel is that mostly ideas are towards solving a global problem, which have an application in India as well.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, Mike, I had the pleasure to be in EdTech Asia. Last year it was in Thailand. And this year, surprisingly, it's in Ho Chi Minh City. And for many Israelis, there's been a lot of discussions about doing education business in Vietnam. So we are discussing now to come over to your summit. So can you give us, just in 30 seconds, why we should all take the airplane and come to Ho Chi Minh City in the end of July?
Okay, not even just Ho Chi Minh City. Don't overlook these smaller markets in Southeast Asia. They're quickly evolving. They're quickly evolving emerging economies. They've got cash systems in place. They're going from unbanked to banked. Vietnam is highly unique. A friend of mine in Shanghai recently just attended some education investors event. I don't know what the data was, but they said something like Vietnam right now is like 2 times China in terms of, I think a lot of it was tied into schools. There's a lot of universities being built in Vietnam right now. The international school market is just booming in Vietnam, especially within the 8 to 15,000 per year segment. There's a lot of reverse brain drain. Vietnamese students going to the US, getting their MBA, PhD, whatever, coming back to Vietnam and opening up EdTech companies that are doing extremely well. So it's a high growth economy. There's a lot going on right there, and it's on the radar of, I would say, anybody that's investing in education in Asia right now. It's very high on their radar. We're doing an event in Singapore specifically on Vietnamese education opportunities, investment opportunities next month.
So, what are the dates of education this year?
The last weekend of July 29 and 30.
So we need to book our flights for July 27th, arrive to 28th to Ho Chi Minh City, spend 2 days on the summit, then 1 day of ecosystem tours.
We have an ecosystem tour, yes.
And then 2 days of doing business together with the Israeli commercial attaché over there.
You do for sure, because you're on the agenda, so yes.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much, and big round of applause to our international panel. And we invite you to a short break, and we continue immediately afterwards. Thank you.